This is Lesson 23.6, The Nation and the People. How did popular nationalism evolve in the last decades of the 19th century? College Board Topic 7.2, Nationalism again. It's the Nationalism chapter. Explain how the development and spread of nationalism affected Europe from 1815 to 1914. And we've seen this already as well. Nationalists encouraged loyalty to the nation in a variety of ways, including romantic idealism, liberal reform, political unification, racialism with a concomitant anti-Semitism, and chauvinism justifying national aggrandizement. And as we've been seeing in these last couple of lessons, while during the 19th century Western European Jews became more socially and politically acculturated, Zionism, a form of Jewish nationalism, developed late in the century as a response to growing anti-Semitism throughout Europe. And we're going to see a lot more information on that as well. Places, all of Europe between 1871 and 1914. Key concepts of the nation and the people. Demagogue. Once again, social Darwinism, we're revisiting that. Jewish emancipation. Zionism, we come back to that as well. And the Great Panic of 1873. Key people of the nation and the people: Charles Darwin, Theodor Herzl, Herbert Spencer, Carl Luga, and Count Arthur de Gobineau. Before 1870, nationalism was championed by two kinds of people. You had liberal constitutionalists. They believed in a limited monarchy. They believed in the expansion of rights and the expansion of voting. And you had radical Republicans, people we might call socialists, or Marxists, or communists. They believed in republics, and they believed in immediate social and political change. These groups used nationalism to do three things that we can identify depending upon where they were and who they were. Number one, challenge authoritarian governments. Number two, liberate minority groups. And number three, unify diverse areas. But after 1870, the nation state was becoming more responsive to the desires of more people. There were new political realities: the Italian kingdom, the German Empire, the Third Republic of France, Austria-Hungary, a new dual monarchy, and a new progressive House of Commons in Britain. And we've studied all of those previously. This House was committed to finding a solution to the Irish issue once and for all. We studied that. And so a question arose: how can these nation states control and use nationalism to their own ends? So we see nationalism becoming institutionalized by these nation states, don't we? Nationalism itself changed based on these new realities. It became more right-wing. And that was because these states were responding to more of what the left actually wanted: the right to vote, improved working conditions, rights and freedoms. But the right was not getting what it wanted. So it made sense that the right would turn to nationalism to ease their frustrations. Social Darwinism, with its survival of the fittest ideology, was becoming more racist and more ethnocentric. And demagogues could now use this racist aspect of nationalism to stir up hatred against imaginary enemies. They could then portray themselves as the savior, and they could distract people from their own failures and corrupt practices. So what is a demagogue? That's a political leader who seeks support by appealing to popular desires, fears, emotions, insecurities, prejudices, and unfounded threats, rather than by using rational or practical arguments. Jews were an especially convenient target, even though their numbers were extremely small in many parts of Europe. During the Dreyfus Affair in France, there weren't even 87,000 Jews in the entire country of almost 39 million. That was 0.22% of the population. Here's a quick list of percentages of Jews living in Europe in the year 1900. In Germany, think about this, it was only 1.04%. In Russia, it was 3.17%. In Great Britain, just a little over 0.5%. In Italy, it was 0.1%. In Austria, it was quite a bit bigger, 4.68%. In Hungary, 4.43%. And Poland was 16.25% Jewish. Making the national citizen. Italian statesman Massimo d'Azeglio said in his memoirs something that became quite famous. He said, "We have made Italy, now we have to make Italians." So much was new after the year 1870. You had new countries, new voting rights, new benefits, new laws, new citizens, and new official languages. It all had to compete with what was very old language and dialect differences, old customs differences, old class differences, old provincial allegiances. This map, for example, shows the various dialectical differences just in the area of Thuringia in central Germany. How do you get people to transfer their sense of belonging and allegiance from the old to the new? Because if you can't, these new nation states are not going to last very long. You need to find a pathway for creating mass loyalty to this new nation state. But whatever these nations did, it was pretty much complete by the 1890s. That's about 20 years, or just one generation. What did these nations do to get there? Let's look at the U.S. We are all either immigrants or descendants of immigrants. Are there similarities between what the 19th century nation states did and what is done here today to transfer their sense of loyalty and sense of belonging to this new context? Here's a list of nationalizing strategies. For example, you can have centralized institutions that reach down to the lowest classes, institutions such as military conscription and free compulsory education. You can have a common currency, standard weights and measures, a national post office, and of course, images of events and leaders. You can have those on banknotes and statues and stamps, things that people see and handle every day. Transportation and communication, railroads, improved highways, these things encourage the growth of nationwide markets. And these pieces of infrastructure have a unifying effect on the entire nation. These nation states also had a growing literacy rate. This facilitated more newspapers and magazines read by a wide variety of people. It also facilitated more books on such things as national history. And you've got patriotic anecdotes. These were intended to promote national pride, and they were propagated by intellectuals, politicians, and ideologues. And they're often based on flimsy historical evidence. George Washington, who chopped down a cherry tree as a kid and could not tell a lie about it. You had new symbols that you can fill the environment with: capital cities, flags, military uniforms, national anthems, pledges, oaths of allegiance, mascots, new holidays, memorials. Nationalism and racism. After 1870, nationalism became more exclusionary. I like to think that nationalism took on physical and hereditary criteria. Darwin's theory of natural selection set the scientific world on fire and spread to popular culture. Herbert Spencer's adaptation of Darwin, which he called survival of the fittest, was social Darwinism. It addressed the following questions. Who was the fittest type of individual to survive? What was the fittest race to survive? Which was the fittest nation to survive? Of course, it's going to be your nation that's the fittest to survive. And if you're going to prove that, then you need to come up with reasons and proofs that your nation is genetically superior to other nations. You need to identify certain physical characteristics that make your people superior to some other people. And you need to make the people in your country who lack these characteristics a threat to your nation's genetic purity. Minorities were targeted for one or more of these three things: either reform, repression, or relocation. If your ethnic group was close enough to the necessary physical criteria, then maybe it qualified for the reform track. And we could call this Russification if you're in Russia, or Germanization if you're in Germany. Jews were universally considered too inferior to reform. They were such outsiders as to be considered nothing but a threat. All of these ideas were supported by supposedly scientific data. In 1854, Arthur de Gobineau wrote an essay on the inequality of the human races. It's interesting that this book actually predates Darwin. He classified races into colors, which he called white, black, and yellow. And he claimed that these races were fixed and unchanging. And he claimed that some races were inherently superior to others. And he claimed that civilizations fall when races mix. And I'm sure you can imagine how this kind of scientific literature was going to influence the thinking of later generations. Jewish emancipation and modern anti-Semitism. The Frankfurt Assembly of 1848 had specified full rights for the Jewish people in that constitution that it created for Wilhelm IV to sign. The constitution they wrote wound up not working out, as we know, and Germany had to wait until 1871 to become a nation. As we've already seen, the North German Confederation was created in 1867. It gave Jews full rights and emancipation in June 1869. Prussia had no state religion. And Bismarck himself claimed to love them in every circumstance, meaning the Jews. In fact, Bismarck even made a speech before the Reichstag in which he stated that the way to produce the most ideal German would be to mate a Christian stallion of German stock with a Jewish mare. The year 1871 started out well for the Jews in the new German Empire. This was part of that trend that had been established in 1848 that we just talked about. The new Constitution of 1871 likewise gave the Jews full rights and emancipation. Jews in Western Europe identified with their nations. They viewed themselves as patriots. We saw that with Alfred Dreyfus. And Jewish emancipation unleashed a huge amount of pent-up energy in Western and Central Europe. Careers were opened that had previously been closed. Business, professions, journalism, medicine, law, the arts. By 1871, most Jews in Western and Central Europe had risen up into the middle classes. This was, unfortunately, a position of high visibility during hard economic times. And it's times like these when people want someone to blame. In 1873, the Vienna stock market collapsed, and this resulted in the Great Panic of 1873. This was part of a worldwide economic downturn that affected the U.S. just as much, if not more. And it took years to recover from the economic fallout. Many small investors who lost everything blamed the Jews. Anti-Semitism could also be a way to gain popular political support. Many politicians expressed anti-Semitism even if they themselves did not practice it. Karl Luga makes a good case study. He was the mayor of Vienna from 1897 to 1910, so that's a long time. And he led the blatantly anti-Semitic Christian Social Party. He advocated racist policies. He wanted to restrict the immigration of Russian and Romanian Jews. And he used to call the city of Budapest Judapest because of its Jewish population. But at the same time, there was another side to Karl Luga. He's credited with modernizing the city of Vienna, much like Napoleon III modernized Paris. It was well known that no political party in Austria could have success with the working class without an anti-Semitic platform. Even Jewish opponents described Luga as decent, generous, chivalrous, and tolerant. Viennese Jewish writer Stefan Zweig described Luga's government as perfectly just and typically democratic. Luga had many Jewish friends. He even explained this once by saying, "I decide who's a Jew." The notion that Karl Luga was just a nice guy in disguise for political support was lost on Adolf Hitler. Hitler lived in Vienna from 1907 to 1913. In his book Mein Kampf, Hitler praised Karl Luga and his Christian Social Party as a major inspiration. Telling people what they want to hear can be dangerous. Many factors fed this anti-Semitism that resulted. There were long traditions of previous intolerance. There was modern popular exclusionary nationalism driven by racist pseudoscience, as we've seen. And there was resentment of Jewish achievement. The idea that the Jews are in control of everything and manipulating everything is a result of this idea. And of course, there were outright lies about Jews. A prime example of outright anti-Semitic lying. The Russian secret police created a work called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion in the year 1903. And it claimed to document an 1897 meeting of the First Zionist Congress. This was Theodor Herzl's organization in Switzerland. In this publication, Jewish elders supposedly outlined plans for global domination by undermining Christian morals, by controlling the press, by controlling economics. And this work was translated into several languages. It went through multiple printings. The Times of London exposed it as a fake in 1921. But that didn't stop car maker Henry Ford. He still had 500,000 copies of it printed in the 1920s. Anti-Semitism was particularly fierce in Eastern Europe. The majority of European Jews lived in Russia. And Jews left Eastern Europe by the millions between 1881 and 1914. Anti-Semitism convinced Theodor Herzl that Europeans could never overcome their hatred of Jews. And Herzl advocated self-emancipation, and this would be achieved by the founding of a Jewish state in Palestine.